Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. A couple things right off the bat. Somebody sent me this book, The Flying Saucer Reader. It says, hey Dave, I know you like books. Thought you might like this. I think I picked it up at a flea market. Your friend Tim. And it is a book, an older one. And I haven't gotten into it yet, but I'm going to breeze through it. I'm always looking for new stuff. And this one was from '67. I like it. Thank you, sir. And then another villager sent this. The eclipse. Texas. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very much. So, the hats. Remember the hats. Selling very well. Liberty, a word you need to know. Not a political word. It's in the Constitution. If you believe in our Constitution, you need to know that word upside back, front and back. And then the eagle. Yes. So, question. Just got off the phone with a good friend. And we were talking about psychics. Now, I'm gonna stir up a hornet's nest here, but I don't care. I think it's good. I actually have a friend, pretty good friend, it's a psychic. We don't talk about my work. We don't talk about missing people. Most of the time we get together and we just talk about how we're doing, how she's doing. Angie likes her, I like her, and we talk about Ben a lot. Now, I know a large portion of you believes that that's demons talking to this person. And then there's another portion of you out there that think, hey, God's given you this tool, use it to your best and see what happens. But then, what about that fine line between someone who calls them a psychic and someone who's not a psychic, but gets some information? Now, why aren't they demonic? Or are they in your world? I'm asking the people that think that psychics are demonic. Or that they're hearing things from the demons. But then why would demons want to do something good for the world, like find a body? See? I don't understand that part. And we're going to talk about this case right off the get-go that deals with this topic I'm talking about right now. Now, if you're a longtime viewer, you know we've talked about people who disappear and are found later on in a dream. That's why I started this conversation this way. So here's how the story goes. A little boy named Ace Davis, 5 years old, went missing June 13th, 2007, and he and his family lived in Ludington, Michigan. And Ludington has a lot of meaning to me. So this is Lake Michigan, Chicago right here. Here's Ludington. Then you got Holland, South Haven, Benton Harbor. All of this area in here is filled with high strangeness, and I mean real high. And I'm including the water and the air and the land. This area has had many airplanes disappear, boats disappear, people disappear, etc. And I've talked about it a lot. But let's talk about Ludington right now. So Ace was playing on sand dunes on the beach in Ludington. Please don't ask me where the parents were, how come they weren't, I don't know. He was playing on the beach alone. Parents didn't see him for a while. He disappears on the beach. And that was on June 13th, late in the day. Parents call the police. Police call the sheriff. They bring out everybody. They have patrols out in the water. They have people on the sand. They have people in the neighborhoods. But they don't know where Ace went. And they have no leads, no nothing. So they searched until late in the night. June 14th, the next day, police and sheriffs combed the beach where he was last seen. And the general thought was he must have gone in the water. As is everyone's thought pattern when water's anywhere around. I get that. Then they went into the neighborhoods. Nobody saw anything. Didn't see a little boy walking around, nothing. But this was big news for 24 hours in Ludington. The entire town knew what was happening, and there was a big response trying to find this little boy. So he disappears late in the day on the 13th. They search all day on the 14th. June 15th, middle of the night, a woman named Mrs. Addison Brewster, who was a resident of Ludington, woke up at 2 a.m. screaming. She told her husband that she saw a boy with sand sliding down onto him. Now, Mrs. Brewster told her husband this while she was in a town called Woodinville traveling. She didn't even know a boy had disappeared. She just had this dream. She told her husband, and her husband said, "Wow, did you hear what happened?" "No." And he tells her that this boy disappeared out on the sand dunes. Mrs. Brewster came home. She told her neighbors, and they laughed at her. Okay, it's not real good support. But she doesn't say much about it. Then a woman was living with this family occasionally. Her name was Mrs. William Hall, and she came to stay with the Brewsters at their home. This was on June 22nd. Well, the search had gone on for a long time. Nothing was found. No boy could be located. And on the 22nd, in the middle of the night, Mrs. Hall has a dream. She has a dream that a boy's body is buried under the sand at the beach. She wakes up the next morning, flustered. Mrs. Brewster hadn't said anything to her about her dream, but they sat down and Mrs. Hall explained to Miss Brewster what happened during the night, the dream she had. And what's interesting is that these dreams happened in the same house to women who hadn't talked about this, but essentially had the same dream. Now, nobody was telling them in their mind. They didn't hear voices. They had a picture of what was happening. Well, at 3 p.m., Mrs. Brewster and Mrs. Hall talk to their husbands, and they say, "Hey, we want to go out and dig out there." The husband said, "You're crazy. We get out there and we're digging, and people see us, they think we're going to be crazy, and they're thinking we're digging, hiding a body or something. No, we're not going out there." And they said, "Yeah, we got to go out there." And he says, "Okay, we'll go out there at night when it gets dark, but not now." So at about 9:30, the group goes out to the beach, and the women talk amongst themselves, and they say, "I think we know where the spot where the boy's body is." So they take quite a walk, because they don't know where the boy was, and they point to the spot. Husbands start digging. And within a matter of 3 or 4 minutes, he hits something in the sand with a shovel. There's a little boy's head. They keep digging and they find a little boy there, deceased. One of them leaves, gets Ludington police. They get the sheriff. And they all come out and they recover the body of Ace Davis. Now the police questioned Mrs. Brewster and Mrs. Hall. And I can only imagine that the police thought these women were whacked. Or suspects, I'm sure. But they both stated that they'd never dreamed anything like this before. And they said that both dreams seemed extremely real. And neither woman knew Ace, had met Ace, or knew his family. So if you're the police, what do you think? I mean, if you are completely don't have any knowledge about the paranormal, souls, dreams, what do you think? So here's some questions that we've talked about before, and a few that we've never talked about. The first question is, why were these ladies chosen to know and to go find? I think it's amazing that both ladies were in the same house. One lady had the dream in the house, another lady had the dream miles away in another city. Why are some kids or people dreamed about and others not? Now, I suppose if you were highly religious, you might say, well, God spoke to these people to go find the body because that would be good. But then my question back would be, what about all the rest of the kids? They're innocent. Why wouldn't God speak for them? And then my next question is, what would this be considered a religious event? Does religion play into this somehow? And then the other question, because we've talked about souls a lot, I asked the question, well, who's communicating this? Is it God? Is it the devil? Is it the soul of the victim? I don't know. And then here's a question. I was talking to somebody about this today. So we have these people that have these dreams about dead bodies. And then they go out and they find the body. Why aren't these dreams being had by people about living people who are missing? People who disappear on a hike. Why aren't they dreamed about? Seems like it'd be reasonable, and it seems like it would have a far greater positive impact to find somebody alive. Now, Alan Attadero, a very, very, very good friend of mine, the father of Jared Attadero, who disappeared in Colorado, who's in Missing 411, our first movie. By the way, you can watch that on Amazon now. It just went up. We've talked about closure, Alan and I. And Alan said that when Jared's remains were found, he said, that wasn't closure to me, Dave. I don't know what closure really means. I'm going to have an open wound from this for the remainder of my life. So I don't like that word closure. That's what Alan said. I respect that a lot coming from him. He's a very smart man. So I go back to you and I say, why are those specific people being found? And why are certain people being notified? And why isn't everybody who goes missing, who dies, why doesn't everyone get a dream about that sooner or later? Good questions. And I know I'll get some very interesting comments from all of you in the comments section, but that's why we're here. bounce these ideas off each other, talk about it. Giddy up. Now, when I talked about Ace and his disappearance, the thought of leaving a 5-year-old boy in the sand dunes alone near the water, no, not would ever happen on the Paulides watch. Never would happen. But I'm not judging the parents 1% because they made the biggest sacrifice of their son. So my prayers are with you, parents. Now, second case involves a hunter in Alaska. Now, before I get going on the story, my mind, for some reason, has been working overtime in Alaska in the last month. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe I'm getting a download, or maybe someone's trying to talk to me about it. Now, there's a lot of people missing in Alaska, but the vast majority of those are criminal. The vast majority are criminal and or extremely poor judgment and or suicide. You know, Alaska is dark for many months, and that leads to extreme depression up there. And I believe they are the #1 state for suicides. So I'm very careful with Alaska, but I know that there's a lot of people there that are missing under very unusual circumstances. Here's the story. That man's name was Howard Silvadon, 50 years old, missing September 4th, 1949, 20 miles southeast of Livengood, Alaska. Where's that, Dave? Oh, good question, Ollie. So this is Fairbanks down here. Go about 50 miles north on Highway 2, and you cut over, and this is where they were hunting. This is Livengood right here. They were hunting about 20-30 miles southeast of Livengood, in the middle of heavy timber. And again, I don't like being in heavy timber, because if you want to hunt, you need to see things before they see you, and you need a line of sight that you can shoot. So I don't understand that, but I know a lot of people do it. He lived with his family in Fairbanks, and he was a steam fitter foreman at Ladd Air Force Base, which is now called Fort Wainwright, outside of Fairbanks. Now, he had 2 sons. One of them was attending the University of Alaska. Howard loved the outdoors, everything related to it, specifically hunting. And he had planned a trip with his 3 buddies to go out to this area near Livengood. Now, Howard was 6'2", big man, not very heavy, about 180 pounds, but he's a big man. Big target, carrying a big rifle. And his buddies and he arrived on September 3rd, 1949, and set up camp. And they set up the camp, and then they went out and hunted that night. They kind of stayed together as a group, the group said, and they didn't see anything. Well, on September 4th, they go out together, and about halfway through the day, Howard says, "Hey, I'm going to break off from you guys. I'm going to go in this direction and see if I can have more luck hunting by myself." Okay. Point of separation. Well, that night he didn't come back. And his friends, being good people, it's the kind of friend you want, they start searching for him right away. Shot their guns off 3 times, no response. Honked the horn on their car, nothing. And then the next morning, they got a few hours of sleep. They thought he'd be in the next morning. Maybe he was cleaning out a caribou, or they didn't know. But the next morning they went up, he's not in camp. So they went out that morning, and they said, you know, there's 3 of us. We could break up into groups and we can go find him. Well, they went out, came back near dusk that day. Nothing. I'm sorry, they came back at about 4 o'clock that day. It didn't get dark until much later. But at 4 o'clock, they come back and they decide, okay, we've got to tell authorities. Something's really wrong. Well, they tell authorities late on September 5th. September 6th, the hunters also notified Ladd Air Force Base that they weren't going to be coming in because they were searching for Howard. Everybody knew Howard at the Air Force Base. He was a foreman. He led a group of pipe fitters, and they all liked him. And right away, the commander at Ladd said, okay, I want you to get together our rescue team, send a helicopter, and bring a canine with you, and go find him. Wow, that's impressive. So they sent out a mountain rescue team, one of the military helicopters, and a rescue canine. And they arrived late on September 6th. And they stayed on track for several days. A couple days into the search on September 9th, searchers found 2 tracks near a creek in an area where you're walking away from the camp in that opposite direction. And it was on the outside perimeter of the search and rescue zone. Right near the tracks, they found 2 things that are kind of unusual. They found 2 of Howard's unsmoked cigars. Now, what do you make of that, Dave? I don't know. I thought about this. Cigars, you'd want to keep them in a dry place, in a zippered bag in your backpack. Someplace where rain, which is in Alaska all the time, wouldn't ruin the cigars. To think that 2 of them are on the ground? The thought is that his tracks were next to the creek because he was getting a drink of water. I buy that thinking. They would know based on the position of the tracks. Maybe they found a knee print, etc. Well, the next day, September 10th, there was a massive number of searchers deployed to that creek area, and they moved the search into that region. The 10th Rescue Squad stayed on scene, and Howard's sons, John and Howard Jr., had arrived and had been searching for several days. And in fact, those 2 boys stayed for 18 days in the woods looking for their dad. Good kids. Good kids. They didn't give up. They kept looking. Wow. You know, I pray that there's people out there today that have that kind of loyalty to family and find the importance of family. Wow, I read that and I got tears in my eyes from it. Well, the local steamfitters union, this was on September 10th, had realized that Howard hadn't been found. And that union put up a $500 reward for him. And the idea behind that was, first of all, to get a lot of publicity in Fairbanks, Live and Good, etc., and to get trappers, hunters, snowmobile, well, there would be no snowmobilers, but people in the backcountry to look for him. That was a lot of money back then. And it made big news at the time. September 23rd, Alaska governor at the time was a man named Ernest Gruning. And he authorized a special allocation of $500 to the state and to the feds to help with search issues. And he was trying to keep people in the field. Now, about this time, I'm thinking, so that was September 23rd. He disappeared on the 4th. He's been missing for 19 days. It's a long search, folks. For 1949, it's one of the longest searches for an adult I had heard. Well, September 24th, right through October 11th, searching continued. rewards went up because Howard's family put up another $500. And his son put up $100 out of his own pocket, trying to keep people in there. So it's hard for you to understand if you've never done it. But looking for somebody in thick woods is extremely tiresome. It's nothing like walking down a trail with nothing obstructing you, and you can almost do it mindlessly by just following the trail. Now, your mind has to be focused because you've got to always be looking. And you're looking 90% of the time off trail for a person. And in Alaska, you not only have to be looking for the person, you have to be making a lot of noise. And you know why? Because you don't want to startle a grizzly bear and become dinner. Yes, going through the woods in Alaska is a lot different than going in the woods in, say, Michigan. Because grizzly bears in Alaska will eat you. Fact. Now, this is a really sad part of the story. 11 years later, May 19th, 1961, Mrs. Silvadon wrote to several Alaska newspapers from her home where she was living then in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She moved back to where her family was after they couldn't find Howard. So it had been 11 years. And she wrote to several newspapers asking them if they had heard if anything related to her husband had been found. Or has he been found? A couple of those newspapers took it upon themselves to contact state and local law enforcement, asking them for details on the disappearance. And this is the sad state of affairs from some law enforcement agencies. They reported back that they didn't even have a report or anything about the searches related to Mr. Silvadon. And what the newspaper stated later is that they put the case together by reading old news articles at the time. It made big news. It's not like nobody knew about it. Everyone knew about it, and the people were searching. The reality is that law enforcement's lazy and they didn't want to keep it. Nowadays, I want, if there's any law enforcement people out there that are in very rural areas, this right here is called a USB. Now, I can carry multiple gigabytes of data on my USB, which means this USB right here, this little thing, will hold tens of thousands of police reports. There is no reason to ever throw away a police report. Ever. And on a missing persons case, when somebody's not found, you should never throw that case away. Now, why is this important? Alaska State Troopers have a list of missing people on their website. Howard's not on it because nobody knows about it. There's no reports. There's no nothing. His rifle, his backpack, all of his belongings, gone. Where did they go? Well, in a 1961 follow-up article about Howard, this is the last paragraph in the article. It says, "The world turns. Years pass. Auroras streak across the sky, and many questions of men swallowed up in Alaska's vast interior must go unanswered." Wow. Not only the ones in the interior. What about the pilots in the air? What about all the men missing in the ocean? It's a three-pronged disappearance in Alaska. I appreciate you being here. Now you can get our books at NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store. I've gotten some great reviews on my writing, and I appreciate that so much from you. If you have one of my books, go to Amazon, leave a review. Don't buy any books on Amazon, but leave a review there. Be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, this is the kindness revolution. It doesn't cost us anything to be kind. And the way our world is right now, I appreciate it every time somebody smiles at me. I really do. Thanks for being here. Take care of yourself, love your family. Paulides out.